Okay, welcome to episode 2. In this episode, we're going to talk a little bit about why are some of these technology transformations so hard. I mean, we continue to hear the statistic of 7 out of 10 of these programs fail, they go over time, over budget, or they don't deliver the business case that was signed up to. And why can't we apply maybe a different way of thinking? Why does it have to always be done the same way? How much innovation really has been applied in this space? So we'll use this episode to get your views. So maybe, Laurence, if I come to you first, you see lots of these transformations playing out. What's your perspective, and what advice maybe would you give to some of the businesses running these types of transformations?
So, Jo, this is the episode where we scare everyone away from doing any transformation project. So that's it, so that we okay. No, in 30 years in the business, and I've seen the good, the bad, and the ugly. And of course, I could tell you about wonderful things that were done, but I guess that wouldn't be so useful to our listeners. So I'll come back to what we discussed in the previous episode, so the decision to go for a project. And of course, if the decision was made asking the right questions and having the right discussions, then there is a better chance that difficulties will come, but that you can overcome the difficulties. If I look at moments where things were tough and where we had the feeling that the company was getting stuck, then I would say usually projects stumble on a number of things. And the first one is these strange beliefs that technology is going to clean up our mess. And you know, if the process is messy, if it's not harmonized, if it's not done or described, if it doesn't correspond to what the business needs, then technology won't solve it. So we need to work on the business, on the processes to serve the business. And you can do that as you move along with technology, but you cannot think that technology will solve it. The second thing, and it's also part of cleaning the mess, is underestimating the level of data cleanup that you need to do in order to move to a new technology. And that is the hard stuff. Now, a lot of companies suffer a lot on this. I would hope that artificial intelligence, for instance, and we might discuss that at some bit further, but I would hope that artificial intelligence can really help. So we're going to suffer, but let's not suffer if it's not necessary. And if we can get some help from technology, let's do it. I would also think that coming back to change management, which we discussed in the first episode, if change management needs have been underestimated, or if we do not really understand what change management means, it's not only about information meeting and tick the box discussions. It is really taking people through change and understanding why that change is important for the business. Underestimating change management and how difficult and crucial it might be could be a reason for project to stumble. I'd like to talk about internal expertise as well. In the best cases, your project is being led by people who know the company inside out, who have the knowledge of the business and the credibility with business people. That's important because when things become difficult, somehow people will look at who is in charge of the project, who's leading it, and say, okay, that person understands the business, so we're going to be fine. I'm going to be able to explain what I'm struggling with and we'll find a solution. So you really have to make sure that there is enough internal expertise on the business. But you're going to have to add a lot of external expertise because you've just not done it before and you need so many people to do it that you're going to have, of course, an implementation partner. Just make sure that you also have people who have only your interest in mind and who are going to help you keep asking the right question. And as a board, I'm asking, who's giving you independent advice? Who's helping you not continue, not being stubborn in a path, if that path is going to cost you more and more money and not lead to resolution of the issue? And then I would say one thing that would be the nightmare of the nightmare is issues not getting discussed early enough. When people struggle on project, there is a say about let's not talk about it too early, whether it is out of being ashamed or afraid or underestimating or in denial. That level of dialogue in the company and between the company and the board is very important, because there are very few problems that you cannot solve if you take them early. But if you let it go too far, then that is where problems happen with projects taking too long, being too costly, and somehow having to be actually expensed without coming to fruition. So that's really what I would say. Have I been negative enough?
Yeah. If you allow me, let me just pick up on one point, if I may, that you made about leadership. So, having led one of these, or co-led actually with you, one of these big transformations, but also having been a part of it from a supervisory board perspective as a head of the digital committee in a large global vehicle leasing business, people still come to me and ask me the question, hey, Stefan, I know that you led this, you're involved in that. I've been asked to sponsor this project. What do you think about it? And, my answer to that always, at least my perspective, is, well, you're being asked the wrong question. Because it's not about sponsorship from a business perspective. It's about, as Laurence was saying, it's about leadership. And that's about ownership, right? So, and it starts with business ownership, identifying, again, the opportunity or the problem to be solved. How is this going to improve my business? What's it going to do for the customer? What's it going to do for, the customer journey, whatever, or other aspects of the business? And how am I going to be accountable to deliver that and deliver those outcomes? And unfortunately, the problem that we often face in very large corporations, different in kind of founder-led companies, which naturally have a longer tenure from a founder perspective. People are around for 3, 4, maybe 5 years in a role. And a lot of these projects, unfortunately, we'll talk about that on another episode, sometimes go beyond their tenure. So there is, there's some kind of a conflict almost of different interests. Oh, I've got to deal with all this pain. I've got to deal with all these difficulties. I've got to ask myself all these questions and deal with all those challenges that Laurence has just described. But I need to deliver the results and be able to show what I've achieved, so I can progress my career, right? And these are real, actual dilemmas that ultimately people face, right? So again, ultimately, it comes back to the business question. What am I trying to do? How is this going to improve my business? What kind of business model, for example, do I need to adjust or, and implement in order to succeed in the world that is changing around me?
It takes some courage and conviction then, whether you're the leadership or sponsorship, to kind of say, this is the right thing, and therefore in those difficult times, but also when you're trying to also manage everything else going on in the business, to say, no, we're steadfast, if you like. Yeah.
If I may rephrase, it is easier to have courage when you have allies. So it takes actually, if I actually relate to a project that we worked on together, it also took knowing that if something was starting to be difficult, we could actually, the two of us, sit down, talk about it, no other agenda than making it successful, look at each other and say, okay, here it's not going well, here it's going well, let's do more of this, let's do less of that, and having the real conversation. So you don't embark on a project like that, and here I'm not in my board capacity, but remembering my executive times, you should not embark on it if you haven't secured that there are a group of people in the company knowing that it might be tough at some points, but that we have to go through it. And knowing that you're going to go through it together.
Great point.
Yeah, that's a great point.
But I mean, Partha, you obviously see and involved in a lot of these transformation projects, and I think you have a bit of a sense and nose for whether these are going on track or not. What are some of the things you look for?
Yeah, firstly, just hearing Stefan and Laurence speak, and you and I were involved in that transformation, right? That's 2019. But the abiding memory so allow me to indulge in a bit of nostalgia, was how the two of them together recorded a video and sent a clear message out to the business and all the stakeholders on why they were doing it, what they were doing it for, and what they expected the behaviors to be. And in many ways, it's that lack of clarity of vision that can sometimes confuse these long journeys. Might be all right for the first 6 months, but the slightest sign of first trouble, people start doubting themselves, and that clarity of vision is extremely important. But yeah, Joe, you and I go around, we are fortunate enough to be seeing these transformations play out across the patch, right? Principally, three things stand out to me, and I'm going to go a bit more programmatic, call it technical, because I think the board angle and the executive angles have been really well covered. The first thing is, I think there's a lot of unlearning to be done. The new age SaaS digital cloud mindset, not even talking AI, around S4HANA, means you cannot just have a program focused on S4HANA. Catches a lot of people out, because less than 45% of end-to-end processes in a consumer or pharma business is now in the core in S4, i.e. 55% is outside in all the surrounding solutions. So a lot of projects we see starts with a SAP focus, then realize, oh, we can't even design this properly. We need to make all these choices around it, right? And in each of these cases, call it warehouse management, sales and marketing, HR, you have 3-4 contenders, right? And you have to make those choices. And essentially, one of the key tenets of success in today's world is fit to standard, right? Once you've spent all this money buying the latest and greatest tech, don't open the hood and replumb it, accept how it does process an invoice. Or
it's very tempting to open the hood and kind of...
Indeed, exactly. And I think a lot of businesses take pride in some of these processes being unique to them. So there is always that temptation, Laurence. But it's exactly that, which is if 55% of the choices are needed to make the 45% work, even before you get into designing your end-to-end processes for the future, and you started by thinking this is a great SAP program, I've gone to the board, I've got the approvals, and suddenly go, oh my God, I'm now dependent on these 10 things, then a lot of projects like this then go on reverse gear, and timelines and scope all starts. So that's clearly happening a lot out in the industry, the recognition that you need to think of it as end-to-end processes and frameworks, not just as an SAP transformation like in the past. I think the second very interesting thing that we see a lot is SAP has obviously talked about this deadline. Now, whether you believe in that deadline, 2029, 30, it's a revolving door, the reality is the last generation of ERPs are no longer fit for purpose. Nobody loves it, but everybody has to do it. So in that context, as that window to get that done by the deadline gets shorter, and as we discussed in the previous episode, less than 15% of the install base of SAP ECC organizations are complete with that journey, the approach increasingly becomes, well, let's just do a technical upgrade. Let's just put a shiny new team, lift and shift the old processes, data, ways of working, and drop it into the new thing and pretend nothing has changed. And that then leads to basically perpetrating the problems of the past for the next decade. Now you sort of think about all the uncertainties Stefan and Laurence talked about in the past episode, or indeed the aspiration to be AI-fied and all that. If you've lifted and shifted the old stuff into a new box, in effect, you are not ready for either of those two levers. So there's a lot of projects which sort of start off with, let's just do an upgrade, then go, oopsie, we need to do selective transformation at least. So there is again a reverse gear process. And actually thinking those things through, I'm not making the case for everything to be reimagined from scratch. There's a reason why these companies are so successful, retain those, but being more considered about it is vital. So anyway, long story short, if we sort of looked at this dial, where basically we've gone through and looked at across 20 different organizations who are currently implementing these projects, what are they saying in terms of big lessons learned? And actually in this discussion, Joe, a lot of those have come through, so I won't elaborate on them. Do it for the right reasons. Don't jump in before you're ready.
That's
right? If your processes are broken, just because you are implementing SAP, it's not going to change anything. Get the right team. I think Laurence has made that to great effect. Try to break it down into modular chunks rather than trying to design future perfection end to end. I remember Stefan routinely scolding me for saying end state design, and he kept on saying there's nothing called end state. It's a target state, right? It's a moving goal post. There are other things. Data has been talked about, business change, Laurence has talked about it. I spoke about the 45-55, connecting it all up. But the one thing that I would highlight, because it's often underestimated, is doing it in new ways. So if you step back and you think about it, these projects take hundreds of millions in most reasonable sized global organizations. They take 3 to 5 years if you're lucky, right? And you have teams of hundreds of people, internals and externals. How much of that effort is actually repetitive? How much of that effort is testing the same thing over and over again, cleansing and loading data, right? Repeating the configuration, writing documents after documents of scripts and specs. Surely the time has come to apply some of the new technologies around AI to that. It's sort of an unexplored territory, but it is something that I think is ripe for change.
Yeah, so I'd love to pick up on this, if that's okay, because I think that's like as a business leader, right, or a senior business leader in charge of a business, CEO, whatever. Ultimately, when you look at one of these projects, it is scary and it's a lot of effort. It's a lot of time. It's a lot of cost. And I'm not talking about, let's call it the SI part, right? The system integration. No, I'm talking about the nitty-gritty of the time that the people who are doing something already today, and they're usually your best people, right? Who have maybe important frontline or supply chain or whatever other roles in the business, you've actually got to pull them out. They don't want to move because they see it as, well, why do I want to go on this project when I see my career going there? There's a huge amount of management attention, right? And a lot of internal cost. And we often focus on the cost over there, but whilst it's kind of budgeted, we don't truly necessarily appreciate the internal cost of going through this kind of process. And ultimately, it's, I don't know, broadly say, call it 50-50, right? A couple of $100 million, whatever, 300 million, okay, 150 here, 150 there. And that is a massive friction point. It's a massive pain point for the organization and for business leaders to deal with. So, and that, as you say, I would tend to agree that that is an area that I think is very, very ripe for some kind of improvement, making it more efficient, making it faster, making it less painful, saving on the time of your most valuable people to do what they do best, be with customers, organize the logistics, whatever it is. I really think that is one of the biggest friction points that faces any management team, any board, any business when looking at these kinds of transformational processes.
I totally agree with that. If you don't put your best people, you're getting nowhere. If you put your best people, while they're doing that, they're not doing anything else. So you'd better be sure that you're using them where they're not replaceable in that transformation and not spending their time doing repetitive tasks that could be automated in the transformation itself. So whatever will support less distraction from the very good business people from the business is absolutely welcome from a project and from a business point of view.
It's fascinating actually hearing that sort of leadership perspective, because we've been, and I'm part of it, we've been implementing these digital programs in exactly the same way today as we did 20 years ago. Now, Stefan, and Laurence, if we think about sort of my example of take the top 5,000 consumer pharma manufacturing companies on the planet, and SAP has 70% market share, and only 15% is done, and each of these programs are 200, 300, 400 million. Think about the amount of money, effort, attention, all of that is being channelized. Even if we could knock 20 to 30% of that off using new technology as AI, especially on the business side and on IT side, See, the systems integrators are on a journey, I'm sure, to use AI for their own work to be done more efficiently. Now, of course, there's a journey there because they are in effect cannibalizing their own revenue stream by replacing people with AI. So it will probably come, it is taking its time, but certainly at some point the SI costs will go down. It's more the business cost. And we at INNOVERV have really focused on solving that problem, applying new generation AI techniques, whether it's generative AI to write specs, it's test automation, which is nothing new, right? By the way, these technologies have existed for a decade, to automate test script writing, regression testing, systems integration testing, data cleansing, validation, profiling, all of them sort of brought together in a common context, sort of using agentic AI framework to sort of have this, call it AI agent that helps with S4HANA implementations by taking some of the repetitive tasks off. It's obviously a big bet, and I'm sure we are not the only one doing it, but we've now piloted it at 3 clients with some really impressive results. So it doesn't solve the whole problem, but if it solves 20 to 30% of the problem, given the basket of opportunity here, I think it would be a significant step forward, and that's something we live in hope of achieving. The first minimum viable product hopefully should be on its way in early June.
But you've been in this industry a long time, Partha. Sorry to.
You keep saying that, Joe. It's going to be really upset.
Reminding me of my age.
Do you actually believe there'll be a different way of doing it?
Yeah, I mean, look, this is almost heresy, but think of this company, 20, 30 billion consumer or pharma company, right? It has this basket of technologies, the ERP in the middle and all the surrounds, right? Salesforce implementation, think of how long it takes to do that versus to do SAP. That takes a year, 6 months, 9 months, 12 months. This takes 6 years, 10 years, 12 years, right? Think of Workday. So when it's the same type of enterprise software, okay, one domain, going into the same company, and actually in processes that are, I would argue, even more specific to that company, such as customer processes. And actually the mindset in those functions have moved into, well, it'll be Salesforce, won't it? So let's just accept it. It's cloud, we can't change it, so we go with it. But when it comes to the ERP, everybody takes their knives out and starts changing it. That mindset has to shift. Moment that mindset shifts, it sort of propagates this fit to standard thing. And then that allows tools like AI first delivery model to knock a lot of the effort out. The more standard, the more repetitive, greater the play with AI, especially with generative AI, where you don't even need it to be structured, algorithm based. We are already seeing 50-60% of a process design document or a test script or code being generated by Gen AI, forget agentic AI. So the technology is there, it's the mindset that needs to shift, but has to change. It's just too long, it's too costly, and in the context of the world that we operate in, client after client organizations are challenging those decisions, saying, should we wait for 3-5 years, or is there something that's going to change the game?
Wow, I mean, we've covered a lot on why these programs are difficult, and I think a lot of food for thought, so thank you very much.